Mikey here, Tres Amigos. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Licenciada Valeria Gonzalez. She is a lawyer with the law firm of Terra Law in Playa del Coco with a presence in San Jose too. How are you today?
Good, thank you so much for the invite.
So just tell us, our audience, a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Valeria. I am one of the senior lawyers at Terra Law. I have been doing this at least for the last 10 years. So we're here to help you purchase or sell your real estate in Guanacaste.
Exactly. So the theme today is purchase sales agreements, or PSAs. I call them contracts to buy and sell real estate. I get a lot of questions from my clients about, what's the buying process, how do the contracts work, what's the duration of the contract, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I invited Valeria here to talk about that from a legal perspective. And the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to just kind of walk through a PSA. There's your initial deposit, there's money in escrow, there's a period for that. Then there's your due diligence period, and that's kind of like 80% of the contract right there. That's what she's going to do and help you out with. Then there's closing costs. We'll talk a little bit about that. Holdbacks, we'll probably get even from the seller side a little bit on what's called capital gains tax.
Capital gains tax.
Right. So let's start off with the initial deposit. It's pretty simple on it, and we're going to go through a basic contract here. So let's say you're buying a condo for $200,000. You would typically put 10% down, so that's $20,000. And that would go into an escrow account. And I'm going to let Valeria speak a little bit about escrow.
Okay, an escrow, it's an impartial third party that manages the money while we are during the duration of the PSA. What they're gonna do is keep the initial deposit, usually 10%, on behalf of both sellers and buyers, while I do the due diligence. So if I found out something that I don't like, something that pops a red flag or that it's not easy to solve, we will let you know within the due diligence period, and we can always back out and request the initial deposit back.
Okay, so let's talk about time frame then. With escrow, it's typically, I write 15 calendar days into the contract to get your 10% here or to the escrow account. And that happens while DDP, the due diligence period, also begins, and that's typically about 30 days. Now, there are instances where there might be a hiccup with schedule or whatever, and we would issue an addendum to the contract that might extend either one.
Yeah, usually what we extend is the due diligence period because we don't have enough information to complete it on time.
So let's talk about due diligence. So now your money's in escrow, and Valeria is doing her work, and actually there's a little bit of work for me in there too, and we're going to go through that. So, well, let's back up to escrow, the KYC process, which is know your client. What can they expect there?
Okay, pretty much once you have a signed PSA, you'll start working on two fronts. First, you'll start working with the escrow company to put down the 10% initial deposit, and you'll have to send them some compliance information. Know your customer and IDs are the basic information they're going to request to allow you to open the escrow account and send the initial deposit. They ask there about where do you work, your address, basic and personal information, the same as source of funds and income. That's the basic you'll have to provide in order to open an escrow account.
Yeah, basically you have to prove you're not a narco trafficker.
Pretty much.
That your money is coming from a legitimate source. And that's a really cool thing about Costa Rica. One of the reasons I like living here too is there's a significant amount of government oversight on funds coming in from out of the country to prevent things like money laundering. So, but the downside of that is all the hoops you have to jump through with KYC. So once you're done with KYC or in the process of KYC, the due diligence period starts, and
it's actually both at the same time.
It's both at the same time.
So you'll start working with the escrow company, and I'll start working on your due diligence.
Right. So what's included with due diligence? Well, we can talk about property and corporate taxes. So
yes, due diligence, we check pretty much everything, that the property is in good standing. We check that the title is free and clear. We check property taxes, municipal taxes. We check building permits, or we check what is called an uso de suelo. What if you're buying a lot, it's what will be allowed to be built in that.
Sort of like a zoning permit.
Exactly. what you will be allowed to build in that property. And then we go over who's the current owner, if they have legal capacity to sell, if it's a corporation, if it's up to date with its corporate obligations. Then we go through HOA if it's a condo, how much you'll pay if there's a reserve fund. Then we check their budget so we know they have a healthy administration, who's the administrator, if that appointment is up to date, CCNRs, all that stuff.
And then let's talk about water and electricity, always the fun ones.
Okay. And here you will need to assign, well, it's important first of all to check that the property you're buying in Guanacaste has water availability.
Water's a big thing here. Most people think Costa Rica is a rainforest.
Yeah, we get lots of water, but no.
we get lots of water half the year, but then the other half it's bone dry. So most of the water here comes from underground.
Well, so if it already has a water meter, you're on the good side. If it's not, we can check what can be done.
That's especially important when you're buying lots. Typically when you're buying something that's built, a house or a condo or whatever, it's got water. There may be some water issues, but I'm not going to get into that today. But it's very, very important that uso de suelo, if I'm buying a lot, what can I build there? Is it a single family residence? Is it mixed use? Is it just commercial? And B, does it have water and electricity?
Yeah, so once you have water, there's the water meter and the electric meter. Once we close, we will assign the electric meter to your company or to your name if you bought it under your personal name. And that will switch the number of the contract that you used to pay monthly your electric bill. The water bill will stay the same. The contract will not change. And we will do that assignment. Usually with electricity it takes 3 weeks around that because they have to wait until you pay the pending invoices. With water it can be a little bit more tricky and it can last a month or two. But if you're patient, we will make sure we're doing it.
Right. And that those lagging utility fees are typically covered in what I call as a holdback. So for a $200,000 condo, I might put $1,000 in there as a holdback, which stays in escrow for 30 days after the closing for any claims that might happen because, there's an outstanding electric bill, cable, data, whatever. Then the buyer can make a claim and escrow will take that money out, give it to the buyer, and then whatever is remaining, could be the whole thing, could be a part of it, returns to the seller at the end of the 30 days.
Exactly. Whatever bills come due after closing, those are prorated between seller and buyer, and then we ask the escrow company to pay the part that the seller should be paying from the holdback.
So also, we talked, I said, I got stuff to do during DDP too. Typically, I always recommend on any construction, any home or condo, a building inspection. And I know a bunch of building inspectors here. Some are licensed in the U.S. One of my favorite ones is licensed in California. Does a really, really good job. He's going to come in. He's going to do a building inspection. He's going to inspect the electricity, the plumbing, tile, everything from cabinet doorknobs and hinges to whether there are any leaks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's going to provide a report. Now, what does that do? It protects my buyer in the case that some big red flag comes up. And it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, where something needs to be fixed per se. And that the buyer really wants fixed before we close. And in that case, it's typically an addendum to the contract. We go out, we get an estimate. Let's say if a tree falls on a gutter and it dents the gutter, and the gutter needs to be repaired, the segment needs to be repaired and replaced, and probably some tiles on the roof got broken. I get a contractor in here, he gives me a number, I present that to my buyer and the seller, and then the seller and the buyer sign off on an addendum for that cost. That cost, let's say, is $1,500, gets credited at closing to the buyer.
Yeah, or the seller can decide he can fix it prior to closing. That's pretty much what the parties agree to.
Right. So that's on me. And then there's inventory. I typically do a photo inventory of everything in the condo or house because one of the things a lot of people are surprised at, because we're in a vacation community, 99% of the properties we're selling, unless they're brand new, come fully furnished and equipped. That's everything from frying pans and wooden spoons to bedding and sheets, furniture, mirrors, knickknacks. There's always some piece of artwork that's a snag.
Always.
That's my favorite toucan. You can't have that. No, I want it. So we hash all that stuff out. And then again, that's an addendum to the contract, an inventory addendum, and both buyer and seller sign off on that. And let's say there's something like the painting I said. I take a picture of the painting, I put a big red X through it on my inventory report, say this does not come with the condominium.
That's a personal item of the seller, and he's taking it at closing.
You already mentioned corporate taxes, et cetera, being filed. So
Corporate taxes.
a lot of properties are held in the name of a Costa Rican corporation. It's probably another video for the future. And we have to make, in order to transfer title, we make sure that that corporation is clean, that all its D101 filings are in place, that the shareholder's declaration has been done, and that it's up to date and paid for. All of its taxes are paid for and fees, et cetera. So again, that's something Valeria is going to help you out with, because
Yes, we will check that all the requirements necessary for that corporation who owns the property is able to transfer the property to yourself or to a corporation we create for yourself,
Right.
or that you already have here.
which is a good point. You can buy. Cool thing about Costa Rica is that's not like Mexico and other places, that you, as a foreigner, can own title to property. It's your property. It's not a 99-year lease, unless it's concession. That's a whole other different world.
Yeah.
So you can put your property in your name, or a couple's name, husband and wife, or husband, wife, and kids, like we had yesterday.
Yeah, we had one of those.
With 5 signatures. Or you can form a corporation. It's typically what's called a limitada, and it gives you a little bit of an anonymity out on the registro, etc. And then that corporation holds title to the property you're buying. Again, that's all stuff that Valeria can set you up with.
Yes, I can explain all the process. It has benefits and disadvantages. Own it under your personal name, owning it under a corporation. We can even set up a trust. So it's different types of ownership.
Right. Power of attorney is another thing she can do for you.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Powers of attorney. If you're not going to be here at closing, we will need power of attorney. If you want it under your personal name, we will need you to come and sign the power of attorney, or go to a Costa Rica consulate in your home country. If not, if you're buying through a corporation, it can be set up through a proxy letter, which makes it a little easier to close.
That's what I normally end up. If there's any question about whether you're going to be here personally for closing, set up a corporation, a limitada, and then you can get the paperwork done remotely to give Valeria power of attorney. It's a limited power of attorney. She doesn't own your corporation.
It's just to purchase your condo.
It's just to close on your behalf in your absence. All right, let's bring it home with closing costs. Typically the buyer's responsibility. What's the buyer's responsibility with respect to that?
Closing costs are around 5 to 6% of the closing of the
I
purchase
average
price.
about 4.78.
Well, it depends. If you want a
Depends on the
trust, if you want a corporation, that adds a little bit into the cost. If you don't want that and you own it under your personal name, then it can go a little down. But it's like that. You have to think that around 2.3% of closing costs are transfer taxes and stamps that get paid directly to the public registry in order to transfer the property. So that's a bulk of it.
Right. A lot of people freak out when they see that on,
I know.
on the closing statement. Like, what am I paying Terra Law for? $2,500.
I wish that was going all
It's
to
just
myself.
a pass through to the government.
Exactly.
So yeah. The other thing is escrow. Escrow fees are pretty low here. Like you're looking at $500 to $1,000 basically.
around that.
And I typically, because escrow protects both buyer and seller, I split that fee between buyer and seller. That can be a sticking point in some contracts, and some sellers say, no, I don't want to do it, the buyer's going to do it, but it's never ever a deal breaker, so don't worry about that. Let's talk a little bit about the seller's responsibilities and closing costs.
Okay, seller responsibility is to provide the information for me to do a due diligence, or if I'm representing the seller, to give the other attorney the information to complete the due diligence, to make sure that everything is up to date with their corporation, that they have enough power of attorney to sell. And one of the main things that we go over is capital gains tax. It's usually 15% of the capital gain unless you purchase before 2019.
July 1st?
July 1st. And then you can decide if you want to pay 2.25% of the whole purchase price or 15% of the capital gain, whichever it's better for you. But if you purchase after that, it's
only
15%.
It's a 15%.
15%.
Right.
Then another important thing is if this is your main residency, that means you have never rented out. It's not been an Airbnb or it has not been for the last a year, 6 months. We can claim that to be your main residency and that it's one of the exceptions for paying capital gains tax.
That's a good point. So, like, let's say if you move down here and you're living in your condo, and then you go to sell it, she could claim that's a primary residence and you avoid capital gains tax.
Exactly. If that's your main residency, then you don't have to pay capital gains tax on that.
Right on. We already talked about holdbacks. I think I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. So what we've done is basically walk through one of my purchase sales agreements or contract to buy and sell real estate, the initial deposit, escrow and fees, KYC. Then the meat of the contract is due diligence, property incorporation, corporate taxes, also the planos. We didn't talk about the drawing.
Oh, yeah, survey plans.
Yeah.
That's important. We check that. We check that the boundaries, that the measurement, that the property does have a survey plan. Some Costa Rican properties that were built a few years ago still don't have them.
Right.
But all that is in the Costa Rican Public Registry, and we check that the property does have it.
Right.
Or if we see something that it's, I don't know, a different
Or walking
measurement.
fences.
Or walking fences, but well.
Fences kind of move sometimes.
We'd rather not.
Getting back, but on the plano thing, I forgot to mention, I had mentioned building inspections, but for people I'm selling lots to, for my buyers who are buying lots, I always recommend to hire an independent topographer to come in and verify that the boundary lines are as they are in the registry. And if we run into a snag, that could hang up the sale. So as with buildings and inspections, you have a topographer come out and verify that yes, these are the boundaries, and yes, it does agree in the registro, and we got to
and this is the right measurement. Sometimes it's a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. Especially
with older properties, that you got to watch the older properties in rural areas because those fences do walk. That's really it. Oh, I did want to mention a thing, but one of the things I put in my contracts is in the whole DDP, it's contingent upon Valeria, the attorney, the buyer's attorney, approving everything in the contract. Because one of the things that we didn't really talk about, let's say your money's in escrow and you get in there in the 15 days, you're protected as the buyer and can take it out for any reason during the 30-day due diligence period. But beyond that, if you don't make a claim, that money becomes non-refundable. Now, conversely, if the seller backs out at any time, the money comes back to you. So it's very important that we get the DDP done within that window, and Valeria's going to put together a comprehensive report that she's going to send to both of us for review, and Sellers Legal too. Yeah, everybody
No,
is.
actually, it doesn't get sent to Sellers Legal, but I do send you a report a couple days prior to its expiration date.
Right.
And we can go further on any questions, any concerns that you might have. And after that, we tell the seller, okay, we agree to moving forward, or you know what, we want to this fixed, or you know what, this property is a mess, which I rarely happens, and we're not moving forward. Thank you very much.
Right.
And you get your initial deposit back in that case. If not, if you approve it, then that initial deposit becomes part of the purchase price.
Right. So you owe the balance on the end.
Exactly.
So I think we've done a good job of covering everything.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
My
We're at
pleasure.
the beach here at Bosque del Mar in Playa Hermosa, and I know there's kind of a lot of background noise, but I'll take waves over people any day of the week. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative. Thanks again for being here. And look me up. Come to dreamcostaRicaRealty.com. Send me a message. Shoot me an email. WhatsApp me. I'm all over the place. Visit my social channels, and I hope to be seeing you soon. If not to buy something, just let's meet and have a beer. So have a great day, everybody. I'm out.
Bye.